Good morning. How you doing? I swear I'm a mess. Look at my eyebrows. Oh my gosh. Is this what 61 looks like? Anyway, it's early, 6:52 in the morning. It's not even 7 o'clock yet, but I'm just so anxious to figure out how this weather's going to go. So every time I go through the GPS, GFS, and see how things look in the future, I get kind of excited. I just want to know how it turns out, and we'll get there eventually. And we'll keep you posted as we go. So yeah, it's Wednesday. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Wednesday, October 23rd. And here are your hazards this morning. It's cold in the Pacific Northwest. Some freeze warnings up there for southwestern Oregon, northern California. Some freeze watches near the Columbia River Gorge, Washington and Oregon, and parts of northern California. A little bit of fog this morning for the Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coasts and up there in Maine and New Hampshire. And Connecticut, just Connecticut. You get outside of the borders around Connecticut, no problem. But in Connecticut, a red flag warning up there issued this morning for today. All right, here's how we're starting out the day temperature-wise. So these are your lows this morning, and you see widespread 30s, 20s, northern plains up into Montana. The Rockies as well, all the way down to New Mexico, over into the northwest with that cooler air coming in, with that system coming in. Even the Willamette Valley, low 40s this morning, but you get down in the southwest, it's 60s for parts of Texas into Oklahoma, Arkansas. Then 50s Missouri up into the Midwest and Great Lakes. 40s when you get mid-Atlantic inland, northward. And where I live in the Midwest here in Iowa, we're in the 40s this morning. 51 for Des Moines. Here's what's going on today on the surface. There's your system moving into the Pacific Northwest with rain and snow depending on elevation. Cold front moving southward through the plains and into the Midwest and the Great Lakes with some rain maybe for Michigan. And then out ahead of it for West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York. Little patch of snow maybe for parts of New York, or rain mixed with snow. And some rain up there, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Maybe some scattered storms, just like a narrow strip. Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma in between, and southern Florida too. Here are your temperatures above and below average, and most of the country is above average for today's highs. Now, not much above average where I live in Iowa, so just single digits, so that cold front making a difference. Today's high is only in the 60s. Again, where I live, we should be in the 50s this time of year. But, low 60s today, we'll take that. Meanwhile, Michigan slightly below average with that front. Out ahead of the front, teens above average. And then in Texas, Oklahoma, 20 degrees above average. And then much below average for the Pacific Northwest where that system is moving in. And those highs are only in the 50s for the low elevations of the coastal areas of Oregon and Washington. A few 50s inland too, but a lot of 40s here too, all the way into Idaho and northwestern Montana. And you get on the other side of the Rockies, though, temperatures jump up this afternoon into the 60s for the northern plains, 60s for the central plains, and then on the other side of the front, 70s, southern Kansas, 80s, Oklahoma, some 90s down in Texas, still some 90s in the desert Southwest, 80s for the Southeast, 70s for the Midwest ahead of the front, places like Kentucky and Ohio, West Virginia, 70s all the way up into New England. You will be cooling off here in the Northeast in the next day or two. So if you're looking for cooler weather, that's good. Tomorrow morning's lows. That front making a difference in the Central Plains 40s, 40s here in Iowa, and we see more 40s moving into the Midwest, places like Ohio, and then into New England as well. 50s along the coast, then even 50s down in the southeast, some 60s down in Florida and Texas and the southwest. Tomorrow's surface, so we cool off today in the Central Plains and we warm up a little bit tomorrow, and then we'll cool off again behind that. So our little low in Wyoming, spreading some rain and snow, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and then we see some scattered showers and storms. For Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, it's more of a general rain, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. And our cooler air does move east into the northeast and even mid-Atlantic. So temperatures above and below average for tomorrow. Again, that warmth coming back into the Central Plains, cooling off east, cooling off northwest, but still warm in Texas. They're kind of staying steady at 15 to 20 degrees above average. Ouch. Those high temperatures in Texas tomorrow in the 90s for the most part. Amarillo, the cool spot, I think at 87. Then you get into even Oklahoma warming up, Kansas warming up, a little bit warmer here in Iowa, 60s to 70s. Then we'll be back in the 60s. I'll show you that coming up on the next map, or next several maps. Cooling off in the northeast, 60s and some 50s. And the northwest is the cool spot with the systems moving in there, 50s and 40s for elevation. Still hot desert southwest, 94 for Phoenix. How about rain next couple of days? This is your 48-hour rainfall ending Friday morning at 8 a.m. And the bullseye is eastern Iowa, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, maybe up to an inch in some isolated areas here. And then a bigger area in lighter green around that, maybe up to a ½ inch for those areas. And then Pacific Northwest, that's mostly snow, although rain in the lower elevations. But the snow looks like this, kind of a smattering in the mountainous areas mostly for Idaho, parts of Montana, definitely Wyoming. So the mountains in southern Montana, the ski resorts there, and then the mountains near Yellowstone, parts of Wyoming, and then even some snow in some of the higher elevations into Oregon and Washington, although it's pretty light. For Friday, our cold front comes back, making progress back into the Midwest and now into the southern plains, so a cool off for at least West Texas here. So ahead of that, some showers and some storms into Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky. General rain, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, with some scattered storms maybe around Corpus Christi and for Melbourne down to Miami on the Atlantic coast of Florida, and another system moving in to the Pacific Northwest with some rain on the coast and some mountains, or snow in the mountains perhaps. All right, for Friday, your anomalous temperatures. Cooling off in the plains, just single digits above average, so getting back down to close to average. However, still teens above average for Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Texas, into the rest of the southeast, even Tennessee Valley, quite warm still. Moderating temperatures for the northeast, but still pretty close to average, and slightly below average for the northwest, but pretty close to average. Those highs on Friday, like I said, back in the 60s here in Iowa, 50s for Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and even into Michigan, and 50s for much of the Northeast. But then further south, of course, it warms up. 60s for a lot of people here, 70s and even some 80s, though, as you head into the Southeast. And then still 95 for Phoenix and a little cooler Northwest. All right, let's take a look at the GFS. I want to find out what's going on for Halloween. And so do you, I imagine. I guess. We'll find out. Let's go through it. So this is this morning. Here's our little cool front. So we have the showers out ahead of it, not quite into the United States, but in Canada. And that cold front is trailing here into the Central Plains. And as we go through the day, you can see a lot of that cooler air shunted eastward, but making southward progress as well. But, oh my goodness, what did I hit? I hit nothing. All right, and so our low here in the northwest, this is going to push some warm air back into the plains for tomorrow and shunt that cooler air east. And then behind the low, we're going to see cooler air return to the plains. So we'll just watch that in action. There's your little bit of light snow for the west. And then our low gets its act together here into Missouri with some showers, maybe some storms for central, southern, and eastern Iowa into Illinois, parts of Wisconsin into Michigan. And as that low passes, then we're going to see cool air filter in behind it. So this gets us into Friday morning here, where we'll start to see a cool off now for the plains, and cooling off in the northeast already. And so that is good. Another system for the Pacific Northwest on the weak side. I mean, there's not a lot going on across the country as we get into the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Again, that cooler air mostly east. closer to average for the plains. And then another system here. This is early Sunday morning for the Pacific Northwest. Looks like some decent rains for Oregon, Northern California, and some snow up there in the Cascades, heavy at times as that system moves in. So this gets us into Monday morning. And as we go, we see our system here. It's getting closer to Halloween now. This is 28th. And what's going to happen is this low is going to form here in Colorado, New Mexico. It's going to bring us some snow here in the Central Rockies. This is the 29th. This looks pretty good for snow for Colorado into Wyoming. It's lighter snow back in the west for the Great Basin and up into the northwest. And we see some windy conditions from Texas through the plains into the Midwest and the Great Lakes. And as this low moves to the east, it brings some showers, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota. Behind that low, we're going to see colder air dropping in. This is going to be a pretty typical this time of year. We get to the end of October, it's kind of without fail. We see that cold air spilling into the plains. And it looks like that's going to be the case for this Halloween. So as that low heads off into Canada, and we start to see that cold air spilling in behind it, and you can see the cold front here. This is later in the day on the 30th, and showers along that front with the cold air dipping southward. Another system, system for the Pacific Northwest. And I can tell you, growing up in Oregon, I remember some pretty rainy, cold Halloween trick-or-treats, or when I was older, I guess egg fights in the park. And then, also living in Lubbock for as long as I did, especially when my son was little, taking him trick-or-treating. I remember one year we had a cold front smack us right in the face, right in the middle of trick-or-treating, and that temperature dropped like a rock with some cold rain right in the middle of trick-or-treating. So, I mean, the timing is kind of like that. This cold front looks like it will be through West Texas during the day Halloween and then just kind of wash out. So along that front, we see the rain showers, down into West Texas, Oklahoma, it's raining outside. Oh, cool. Arkansas, Missouri, into the Great Lakes. Raining pretty good. I thought we were supposed to have drizzle this morning. All right, so this is your Halloween forecast. This is during the day Halloween, that cold front pressing into the plains and into the Midwest, system for the Pacific Northwest, spreading some rain and snow. And then we see, more rain down here in West Texas, Halloween night and overnight, and a little bit of light snow for eastern Oregon into Idaho. And then we're going to watch maybe a tropical system, maybe a hurricane, southern Florida. So we'll keep an eye on that. And look at that mess in West Texas as we get into, this is the 4th and the 5th. Just a bunch of rain and snow in New Mexico. And then that low, if this comes true, lifts almost straight north, which is odd, with rain ahead of it and snow behind it. So we'll keep an eye on that. That's quite a ways away, though. All right, 6 to 10 day outlook. Temperature-wise, keeping it cool for the eastern or the western third of the country. The rest of the country pretty much on the warm side. Precipitation-wise, getting wetter, especially into the Midwest and the plains, and the northern half of the country. The dry spot, confined to Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, and the Northeast. Let's take another look at the weekend, where we have Saturday temperatures much above average, moving back into the northern plains out of the Rockies. So just warm here, western half of the country, and the warmest above average would be like Wyoming, western Nebraska, South Dakota, into Montana. And then also for the southeast, teens above average. Single digits to near teens above average for a lot of the southwest. So, I mean, pretty warm here everywhere, except for Great Lakes Northeast, really close to average or slightly below. Those highs on Saturday, 50s, even some 40s Northeast. Great Lakes up into, Minnesota, North Dakota. But you got 60s for Iowa, into Nebraska, into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then we transition into higher 60s, even into the 70s as you head south, 80s for the southeast and for Texas 90s for the desert Southwest. That's Saturday. Here's Sunday. Much above average northern plains, Montana, Nebraska included in that, Wyoming, the Rockies, all the way down into Texas. We're talking 20 degrees above average. Texas, 30 almost degrees above average for the Dakotas. Just really warm here as that warmth moves back into the plains. Still cool, north or central, east central, and into the northeast. And for the Pacific Northwest, especially Northern California, those highs on Sunday. Looking pretty nice for the Pacific Northwest, 50s, some 40s, especially with elevation. But you get into the plains, we're back in the 70s in South Dakota, North Dakota, crazy. 70s trying to nose into Iowa, mostly 60s though. 70s for Kansas, 80s, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, much of the Northeast into the 80s. But cooling off as you head into the Midwest, Great Lakes, and especially Northeast where it will be cool. All right, one more closer look at a preview of Halloween night. So this is around trick-or-treat time and much below average for Oregon, Northern California, into Nevada, Idaho. But really the West Coast below average. Everyone else kind of above average, but not much above average for the plains. You have to get down into, say, East Texas, North Texas, into Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi to be much above average, and warming up for the Northeast for Halloween evening. Those actual temperatures around trick-or-treat time still in the 50s for the Northeast or 60s. So even though it's above average or much above average, it's still kind of cool. I mean, it's pleasant. Mid-Atlantic, 60s, 70s. Here in Iowa, 50s for trick-or-treating. That's very mild for this time of year. 40s, though, as you get into North Dakota, parts of South Dakota. The West is kind of cool, 40s along the coast in the Pacific Northwest, 30s inland, and, of course, with elevation. Not bad for California. A lot of 60s, 70s for the desert Southwest. That's kind of par for the course. And even warm into West Texas, 70s with that front washing out. But a little bit of rain perhaps for West Texas, eastern New Mexico around trick-or-treat time. A little bit of snow up there in the Pacific Northwest, and maybe some heavy rain for parts of Florida. So that's a sneak peek again at Halloween. We'll keep you posted as we get closer. And of course, we'll keep giving you the forecast through the next weekend and usually beyond. So thanks for tuning in again this morning. Really appreciate you. And you have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow right here on the Weather Mic.